All right, everybody, welcome into the Chip and Kip Sports Podcast. For all of our loyal listeners who listened to episode one, you'll know that we went through a pretty severe name change. I won't even say our previous name, but if you're loyal and you listen to episode one, you'll know. All right, but also on that note, shout out to Chandler, who in our last episode was still in the womb waiting to come out, and so that was our topic of conversation. But she has been born, so because of that, we now are calling this podcast the Chip and Kip Sports Podcast in honor of both of our daughters. So kind of an inside joke, but that's what our name is. Um,
Our
but yeah,
first
today we're gonna be.
our
Go
first
ahead.
episode post rebrand.
Yep, exactly. But today we're gonna be going into the Milwaukee Bucks and what they're gonna be going through this offseason. We're gonna talk about some of the player grades from the 2024-2025 season. We're also going to get into some 2K ratings like we did on the Packers episode. Then we're going to be talking about who we want to see come back, who we think the Bucks should resign, go into some of the player option situations like that. And then we're also going to be doing a deep dive on the salary cap. And so that might be where we start. But first, I wanted to recognize my lovely co host, Drew Sayer, spelled as Drew Holiday spells his name. So welcome, Drew.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. But you said you wanted me to start with the salary cap portion.
Yeah, I just feel like I was thinking about it too because I think a lot of our listeners are maybe at least ones I know of are maybe NFL fans first and NBA or Bucks fans as a secondary or tertiary interest.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that something a lot of people may struggle with is knowing the ins and outs of how team building is different between the NFL and the NBA, and I think a lot of that has to do with big differences and terminology differences and everything within the salary cap and how the financials work. So I think it'd be educational for all of us to start with that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna pull out my inner Bobby Marks here. I don't have a cool projector behind me to point out all the details, but I did take some notes because until really a couple weeks ago, I've been kind of confused on the salary cap and how it all works in the NBA too. But I've been trying to make my own predictions about what the Bucks are gonna do this offseason, so I went into the details, used a lot of Chat GPT to help me figure some things out. But first of all, I think it's most important to talk about who is going to be under salary for the Bucks this year. And do you know how many guaranteed contracts the Bucks have?
It's not many. I don't know the exact number. I'm gonna guess 8.
It's four.
What? Wow.
So obviously we got some player options in there, but the only guys that are 100% under contract is Giannis making 54 million, Dame making 54 million, Kuzma's making 22 and a half. Then the last one is Tyler Smith making 1.9 million. But then like four sounds really low, but then you have guys like AJ Green, Ajax, Chris Livingston. Those three are on non-guaranteed contracts, and so we'll get into Chris Livingston. He's one guy I think they might let go, but Ajax and AJ Green are I think 100% coming back on that non-guaranteed deal, which
Yeah.
essentially means the
I
team can go ahead.
I didn't realize those were non-guaranteed contracts because my guess of 8 had those 3 guys in my mind.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I think that just means the team can decide whether they want to pay that contract to them, right?
Yeah, which is to point out another difference between the NFL and NBA. Like that is the the guarantee structure of the contracts is a big part of it. You think about a guy
Mm-hmm.
like Kuzma playing on the number that he's at. Um, I believe he is. Yeah, he's going to be paid 22 million next year. If that was in the NFL, he probably would be cut.
Yeah,
And the team could they'd suffer dead cap, but they could get out of that number a lot easier. So yeah, contracts being fully guaranteed is a big wrinkle that makes things tougher for NBA teams.
yeah, yeah. And so that, I mean, a lot of people think that the contract for Kuzma is worse than it is, but it's still pretty bad for a guy that had 0 points, 0 rebounds, assists, steals, whatnot in a playoff game. So
Yeah. The
We'll
Tony
talk
Snell
about Kuzma.
intro.
Yep. But for a name brand player in a playoff game. So it made the Tony Snell look not bad at all.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, those are the guys under contract was Giannis, Dame, Kuzma, Green, Ajax, Livingston, Smith, with like I said, a few being non-guaranteed. And then there's one more guy that I'm just assuming is going to be on the roster because he's not quite to the point where he can be a full real estate mogul. But Pat Connaughton, he's going to opt into that $9 million contract. He'd be really silly not to. Um, I did hear that recently he created his own LinkedIn profile for his real estate company, and so he's definitely thinking more about real estate than basketball at this point. But he's going to opt in.
Yeah, I wonder what the rest of his career is going to look like. Just I don't know. I wonder what type of contract offers he'll have this time next year when his Bucks contract is up.
Yeah, yeah. On my Twitter account, every time I see a mention of the Pat Connaughton 43-point game at the end of the season, I retweet it as many times as I need to because I really hope those other GMs are seeing that stat line that as a starter he averaged 43 and 12.
Way
But
to
yeah, I
do
don't think.
way to do your part in helping the Bucks.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think he might have a big opportunity to start playing again next year, but I
Yeah.
hope not. Okay,
Because of you, the Bucks are going to get a 2047 second round pick in return for trading him away at the deadline.
I'll be I'll be so excited about that if that happens. Okay, so that puts their contracts, assuming that Connaughton opts in and that all those non-guaranteed guys they re-sign or they guarantee those contracts. That puts their cap hit for the year at 148.7 million.
So will you read off the names of those guys that put the cap hit at that?
Yeah, it's Giannis, Dame, Kuz, Connaughton, AJ Green, Andre Jackson Jr., Chris Livingston, Tyler Smith.
Okay.
Yeah, so 148.8 roughly is what they would have under contract with all those numbers, all those guys. The salary cap for this year is 154.6. So that puts them roughly 5 to 6 million below the salary cap
With only 8 players?
with yeah, 8 players under contract. So this is where I was really confused because I'm like, how in the heck do they spend $8 million on 7 more players or whatever? And so I got into all the luxury tax thresholds, that first and second apron, all that, and what it means. And so if there's any listeners on here that realize I did it completely incorrectly, let us know and we'll go over it again. But this is what I learned from this is that the luxury tax that is at 187.9 million. So once again, the salary cap is 154. The luxury tax is 187. And what that means is if the team spends up to that amount, anything after that that they spend is taxed. And so I think there's some really weird rules where it's like for every additional $200 you spend, it's like 1% tax or something like that. So it's a lot of money that they have to spend. And so that's what the luxury tax means. But above the luxury tax is the first apron. And so that's at like 195 million this year. And there's a bunch of rules where if you go above the first apron, you lose out on some certain opportunities. And so that's what we're going to get into here today is some of the exceptions, like the non-taxpayer mid-level exception is one thing we're going to talk about. There's the biennial exception too. And so, do you have any questions on that so far?
No, this is about as deep as my understanding goes.
Okay. Yeah, and I've only researched it once. So I'm going to try to say it quickly and not go too deep on it. But essentially, the non-taxpayer mid-level exception is worth 14.1 million this year, and that is for teams that go over the salary cap, but they stay under the first apron. And
Yeah.
so the salary cap being 154, first apron being 195. So say they spent 180 million on contracts, they would get the full 14.1 million that they'd be able to spend. However, if they go over the first apron, I think this is what the Bucks were at the last few years. They actually last year they were second apron, but if you go over the first apron, the exception goes from 14 million down to like 6. And so that's one of the penalties of going over the first apron. But if you go over the second apron, which is 207 million, you get none of that. So if you go over the second apron and say you only have 8 players on contract, then you can only use vet minimum contracts. And so you'd have to find 6 extra guys that are willing to just take 2 million to come play for you. And so with the first apron, that's where the Bucks currently were to end last season.
Mm-hmm.
If that remains true, they go over the first apron again this year, entering the season, they're gonna have like 6 point something million to spend on that taxpayer mid-level exception. But hopefully they can stay under that first apron and have that full 14. And so that's the money that they're going to be able to have to spend on guys like Gary Trent or KPJ or Ryan Rollins. Guys they're going to want to bring back is going to be either that 14 or that 6. And I'm assuming they're not going to go over the second apron, which would make them lose all of that.
Yeah. And then like you go into, if you get over that second apron, there's repeater taxes and other penalties, that you can't aggregate salaries in a trade.
Mm-hmm.
You can't pick up guys on the buyout market. So I think we're correct to assume they'll for sure be under the second apron. You're just saying your question is, at this point going into this season, do they try and stay under the first apron, or do they try and split the difference between the 2 aprons? Is that your question?
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. And from what I've read, it seems like the Bucks are going to try their hardest to stay under that first apron, just because, as we've talked about, it's one of those years that it doesn't seem like they're going to be real contenders, and so might as well use this as an opportunity to build and help those young guys get better. And so, I mean, I'm sure the owners want a break of paying the tax too. This might be their year to take a little break before they gear up for another run.
Yeah, and it's important to highlight the role that ownership plays in it too. I mean, billionaires tend to ruin lots of stuff, but I mean, you can look at even the Chris Middleton for Kyle Kuzma trade and say, ownership had their hand in that because they wanted a guy whose contract was lower, and Kuzma's contract is unique because it gets smaller each successive year. So he gets paid less next year than he did this year, and the same the year after that. And all of those, like you said, every $200 extra gets taxed more and more. I mean, that money is coming out of their pocket. And obviously it's not really hurting them much because they're worth billions and billions of dollars, and they're still making profit off owning the Bucks. But yeah, their motivation is they get under the luxury tax or lower, less over the luxury tax. Every dollar they save goes back to them.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you get a crappy owner, and I kind of fear the Bucks might have one of those right now with Jimmy Haslam, but sometimes winning isn't the only motivation in team building, it seems like.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and going back to the Kuzma trade, there are some things that I think most fans don't realize that they were able to accomplish. If they didn't make that trade, obviously Chris Middleton probably wouldn't have played in the playoffs, seeing how he was with the Wizards. They sat him down after just a couple weeks of games to get healthy. So there's that aspect of it, but also they were able to get under the second apron, which is a huge deal. And they also got a trade exception for close to 8 million. So what that means is they can make a trade and, say they want to trade Pat Connaughton, who has a $9 million contract, and say they want to bring in, I don't know, let's say like, this is totally unrealistic, but like a Jonathan Isaac or something like that, and say there's a gap between their contracts, the Bucks can take on an additional $8 million of salary because they have that trade exception. And so that's a huge deal for them, something they've really never had. They also got another small one from the DeLon Wright and the Beauchamp trade. So the Bucks have roughly $10 million worth of trade exceptions, which is a really big deal. And so I still am mad about the Kuzma trade. I still would have rather had Chris Middleton, and I don't know. total bummer, but they gave us some life going into this offseason. A little bit of things to get excited about because otherwise we'd be totally screwed and have to sign all vet minimum guys.
Yeah. I don't want to bury the lead here because this is something I want to talk about later. But as a Bucks fan, and just as a sports fan in general, you know how when you're thinking about your teams and thinking about what their futures might look like, it's really hard to accept sometimes that they just might not be good.
Hmm.
You just always try and talk yourself into what the best possible scenario is.
Yeah.
One of my best possible scenarios that basketball wise might not be the smartest thing in the world, but just my own nostalgia and just how I feel about the Bucks is this time next year. What if Chris Middleton comes back on like a 2-year, $27 million contract or something?
I would love it. Yeah, I would be so excited about it, even though it's definitely not the right move for the team.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just looking at lists of future free agents and I saw his name on there and was just, hmm.
Yeah, yeah, and he's still like give him a whole offseason. He could be healthy going into next year.
Yeah,
It's not like the dude's gonna retire anytime soon. He might still have another half decade in him. Who knows?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be fun.
Well,
Okay,
thanks for the lesson on all this.
yeah. So just all our listeners, remember we're gonna get into who we want them to re-sign, who we think they could potentially re-sign, or even sign out on the free agent market. That number to think about is probably going to be the 14.1 million that we have access to. So we'll get into that later in the podcast. But for now, we can move on to our player grades for the season. Um, and with this, I was just thinking about going. We'll start with the starting lineup they had most of the year. So we're gonna go Dame, Prince, Kuzma, Giannis, Brook. So we'll start with those five, and for each of them, we're gonna give them a rating from like A plus to F minus, and then reasoning why you give them that rating. And then we're also gonna, before we move on to the next player, give them a 2K rating, what we think they're at right now. So I'm gonna kick it off to Drew. We're gonna start with Damian Lillard.
Okay, let me pull up his numbers real quick. I was impressed with him this year. Here, sorry, you gotta give me 1 second here.
You're good.
I just am still kind of at a point with him where sometimes I turn a game on and watch him play, and I'm just still baffled that he's on the Bucks.
Yeah.
It's still just, I don't know. He was one of those guys that playing for Portland all those years, we always loved him, and it's just so cool that he's on the Bucks now. Um, my heart just hurts for him, man. That injury for him at the stage that he's at in his career right now could be pretty devastating for his future. And I know he's not gonna play at all next year. But even coming back the year after that with a whole year and a half off, just for a small guard, he's not necessarily, I don't know, he just relies on quickness for separation because he's not a bigger guard. He can't finish with, through tough contact. He's not the most physical guy in the world. He really relies on that burst on his step back or his instant acceleration on his drives. And if there's one muscle in the body that does a lot of that, one injury that could take that skill away from a player, it's the Achilles tear. And I'm worried about what his future is going to look like after that injury.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And just to add in there, yeah, people said about KD, what about him coming back? But he can just turn into Dirk Nowitzki with his height and his length, and so he's been fine. But yeah, I agree with you. It's scary.
Yeah, to me it's somewhat similar to what it would have been like if Russell Westbrook had the injury.
Yeah.
It takes away a part of his game that's really important to him. But going back to this season, Dame's just such a consistently great player. I was a little worried with his his ability to finish at the rim. It seemed like he was not converting contested shots down close to the hoop as much as he had in the past. Um, but I thought him and Giannis looked a lot better together this year. They played in two man actions a lot more consistently, and I thought had greater success with it. And I just think he looked more like himself. He seemed happier. I would give him a B plus relative to expectations for what we expect Dame to be.
That's exactly where I had him, was a B plus.
Really,
I think last year he probably would have been a B minus, and that would have been me being higher than the rest of the basketball world on that.
yeah.
But yeah, I think he looked a lot better, way more efficient. My only knock on him this year is, and this is more of a knock on Doc, but his clutch numbers were not good this year.
Mm.
That's something he's always thrived at, but just their offensive sets look terrible this year in the clutch, and so I'm gonna blame it more on that. But yeah, I think he looked way better with Giannis, more efficient. Yeah, my heart goes out to him. I'm still sad about that.
It's a tough situation.
Yeah. Okay, what would you have his 2K rating?
So this I'm gonna defer these to you. I haven't
Okay.
played 2K enough lately to know where the ratings are supposed to be.
Okay. Yeah, I can take care of that. Um, I think here I'm gonna pull up the. Can you still see me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna give my rating and then tell you what they currently have him rated at,
Okay.
because there's some I definitely disagree with. The dude who rates these players is an idiot. Because you'll have guys like, let me think of an example. Like PJ Washington, you know how he's a pretty good defender, like interior wing defender that can actually stop some guys. They have his defensive rating at like 52. It's
Whoa.
always guys like that that just makes me be like, why did they do that? Like, what's going on here? Okay, so I would have Damian Lillard at a 91, and that's exactly where 2K has him too. I think he's still high enough to be considered a borderline top 20 player. Um, I think to be top 10, you have to be at least a 93, 94 in that range, and so he's quite a bit below those guys still. But I think he's still at the point in his career where he's at least a 90. Averaging 25 and close to 8 assists, whatever it ended up being. I think this would
Yeah.
have been 91.
He really did have such. He was barely talked about at all, but he had such a
Yeah,
great season.
for sure. Okay, this is going to be a funny change of pace, but let's now talk about Torian Prince.
I don't I don't like that guy very much. Yeah, I mean, a guy that can hit shots like that, catch and shoot, is always going to have value, but there were some defensive effort possessions with him that were so bad that I don't care what you do on offense or what the rest of your game looks like. If you're going to, especially off ball, just not even try and stay connected
Hmm.
with your guy, I don't care. I don't like you.
Yeah, so what's your grade on him? Obviously relative to expectation.
C plus.
Okay.
He shot really well, so it's probably too low of a grade, but he's just not necessarily a guy that I would care a ton to have back on the team.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So I had him at a B minus. And again, he's also a guy I didn't like. The led the league in 3-point percentage. Did he finish that way?
He was up there,
I think
which
before
is
the playoffs, he was number one. And so that I think alone boosted him half a letter grade. I mean, you got to give him at least a C plus, B minus for that. But yeah, that was my biggest knock on him is he just looked lost on defense. And it
mhm.
was like that the whole season. Like you can say that the first few games about, oh, okay, just give him time. It was the whole season up until the playoffs, and then he just pretty much got benched, was unplayable, and the Bucks always have the problem of having guys that can shoot in the regular season and not in the playoffs, and he was certainly one of those guys.
Mhm.
Led the league in percentage, but his volume was nothing. So
Yeah,
yeah, and he disappointed me on defense too. I think coming into the season, I was like, okay, this is a Jay Crowder that's actually good, and they finally might have gotten a guy that can kind of give you what PJ Tucker did, but his defense was very mid.
I think that's even way overstating how good he was. I think mid is he wasn't even close to mid in my opinion.
Yeah. It does hurt that Doc would put him on Jalen Brunson and Kyrie Irving and guys like that
Yeah,
once they traded for Kuzma, but
yeah, that's true.
yeah. So yeah, that's definitely a guy. We'll get into this later, but I don't want them to re-sign him, and I don't think they will.
Yeah, I don't have him in my plans either.
Yeah. Okay, and then 2K rating, I'm gonna give him a 76. Let me see what 2K has him at. Just because he is still a 3 and D guy that has a very high 3-point rating.
Yeah,
Actually, that's just what they have him at is 76, but obviously
you're
he's very one-dimensional. What were you gonna say?
I just said you're 2 for 2.
Okay, next let's talk about Kuzma.
So I was thinking about this. I should state by saying that I love Chris Middleton. He's my favorite Buck ever.
Hmm.
But my 3 worst moments as a Buck fan. I'm gonna say 4. My 4 worst moments as a Bucks fan. And I'm gonna go in chronological order. The first one was when I got the notification that Jabari Parker tore his ACL.
Hmm.
That took my soul for a moment there. The second one was that series in the bubble when the Bucks lost in 5 to the Heat. I have never been as a that was one of my lowest moments as a Bucks fan.
Hmm.
The next one was when Chris Middleton sprained his MCL in 2022 in that bowl series
Yep.
because that 2022 team was so good, and when that injury happened, they didn't have a chance after that.
They would have gone back to back for sure, I think.
They would have made the finals at least, I think.
Yeah.
But the fourth one was when I was sitting in class and I got the notification that they traded Chris for Kyle freaking Kuzma. I was so mad. And you're right. We get these exceptions and that like we get under the apron and it helps in the long run with all these, fancy math type things, but I just I was not a fan of Kuzma from the start. But as you watch him, there are some things he does better than Middleton, and some things that are useful to the team. The thing that worries me though is, as it is, playing Giannis and Kuzma at the same time is already pretty difficult because neither of them shoot. There's just no spacing on the floor when they're both out there.
Hmm.
And so if we're gonna let go of Lopez, I mean, you got to find a way to get a center that can shoot because you can't. I mean, you already can't play 2 of them at the same time. Imagine how bad it would be if you had Kuzma, Giannis, and another center who can't shoot. It's not feasible at all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think Kuzma was okay in some respects, but I would give him. I don't know. There's certain things about how he plays that I'm like, there's no way the Bucks thought that this guy was actually going to come in and be better than Middleton.
Yeah. So what is your rating that you have him at?
D+.
That's just where I have him too.
Yeah. He
Yeah.
can't shoot. Half the time he drives too. It's kind of like Kevin Porter Jr., where like every other time they drive, they have a flash of CTE when they're halfway there and throw up the wildest shot that just
Yeah.
like, what are you thinking? And so I just don't think that offensively he does much at all. But he's a better defender than Middleton.
Yeah. That was his saving grace because imagine what his grade would have been if he played defense like he did in Washington. And so everyone right away when they saw him play was like, okay, this guy cannot shoot. The spacing's funky, but okay, his defense is actually pretty stout. And so yeah, that's why I have him high as I do as a D+, which is not high at all. But the I had him at like a C, and then I saw the 0-0-0 whatever they call it game, and I definitely dropped him down to the D's just based off that.
Yeah.
But he's a guy I hope that they don't start next year, and I think there's a chance they don't. Depending, like you said, on what type of center they get to start in that system. But yeah, I could see him coming off the bench. I think on a team where Giannis isn't there, he would be, a good third star because he literally does all the same stuff that Giannis does, but just worse. So if they can figure out how to stagger those guys, he'll be an asset still. And I'm glad he's only 22 million when we thought he's more of a max contract guy, but yeah, I have him as a D plus, and my 2K rating fluctuated quite a bit towards like right before the playoffs. He had some really good games, and I had him up to like an 82 maybe, but I've got him at an 80. And this is one that I actually checked before, and I agreed with 2K, so they put it in my mind. But before I had him at like an 82, and then started to think about it, and he's barely an 80, just because he does have the potential to drop 30 a night. We saw him in Washington a couple years back, average over 20 points a game. So he's maybe one of a few players on the Bucks that can do that, but it's just too inconsistent. So I can't have him much higher than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of lose respect for stats like that, empty stats, when you see a guy like Pat Connaughton put up 43 at the end of the season.
Don't hate on Pat. Come on, that was magical.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Okay, let's go on to Giannis now. More fun.
Yeah, dude, he'll be an A plus every year. He he's the redeeming quality of the team in so many ways. And yeah, I don't know. He just gives you a chance every single year, and NBA fans and Bucks fans take him for granted every single year. He is so good and so fun to watch.
Yeah, I actually had him at an A plus as well, and I thought about this for a while because I was thinking an A plus year would be Giannis winning the MVP, Giannis shooting 80% from the free throw line, 35% from three. But this is all relative to expectation, and him being a top three guy, a guy that in other years might have won MVP. It's just Shea was so good and Jokic too. So him developing that mid-range jumper, him being more of a playmaker this year, I think he deserved the A plus.
Yeah. The the stats I love from him is I think he only took 62 threes this season, so
Hmm.
quite a bit less than one a game. And his mid range was amazing. It got me thinking. I mean, there's a lot of things since the championship the Bucks have done wrong. Asset mismanagement or transaction here or two that they lost on.
Hmm.
But in retrospect, one of their biggest mistakes might be keeping that bald shooting coach around for as long as they did. I can't,
Oppenheimer.
yeah, Oppenheimer. I couldn't remember his name, but I could picture his face. But as soon as they got rid of his ass, Giannis was hitting mid rangers so well
Yeah,
on a really high volume too. I think he had a top 10 volume in the league, and he was above middle of the pack for percentage. It was awesome.
yeah. Seriously. On that note, I'm gonna pull up. I haven't checked it in months, but I know when he started hitting that mid range, I was checking the 2K ratings for his mid range, and I'm gonna try to pull it up here. Yeah, okay. In the past, that number has been like in the 60s. They had it all the way up to 88 for his mid range shot this year,
Whoa.
and so they're giving him some love, and it's because of the volume and the percentage. It was just super efficient. But on
It
that,
gi-
go ahead.
I was gonna say it gives me hope. Just some of those big power forward type guys, Duncan, Nowitzki, over the years, had to really change their game in order to survive into their 30s. I always
Mhm.
wondered if Giannis would be able to do that, and we might be starting to see signs of that. Maybe this is a little bit more of the player he's going to be as he gets older.
Yeah, and especially hearing him. I don't know if you listened to the press conference at the end of the season. It was just like after their last game they lost, and they asked him about him being more of a playmaker in the final stretch of the season, and he was talking about how he loved it. And obviously, it's still up in the air if he's going to come back to Milwaukee this year. But he, they asked him what he's excited about next year, and that's one of the things he said is I'm really excited to keep working on my playmaking ability and be more point Giannis. And so, like you said, that's something that could really keep him in the league. Well, he's going to be in the league for a while, but keep him at that superstar level is being able to run the offense like Jokic does.
Yeah. But then we take for granted, too, he hasn't lost a step at all attacking the rim. He still dunks more, scores within the restricted area more than anyone else in the league. And once again, it's not even close between him and second
Yeah,
place.
yeah, yeah. He's so good. I remember after last year's playoffs when he was hurt all offseason, I was just sad because I hadn't seen Giannis play in the playoffs in 2 years, and I was just thinking all year, man, I can't wait for October to see Giannis play again. It was a really fun year of watching all those games. Giannis had such a good season,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I'm just glad he was healthy for the playoffs. Okay, and my rating for him is a 98. I have him, Shea, and Jokic all at 98 after this season. And 2K doesn't like to hand out 99s, and I agree with it because a 99 would be a perfectly complete player, and Giannis is missing out on free throw shooting and 3-point shooting, so he's not going to be a 99 player. Just like how Jokic isn't a great interior defender, he's not going to be a 99, so I don't know. That's where I have him, and I think 2K does as well. Let's see. Yep, they had him at a 98 all season, or for like the last 2/3 of the season. So a lot of respect there. Okay, this is one I'm excited about. Let's talk about Brook Lopez. I think the fan base is very divided on this, so I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. I wrote a couple things down. I actually saw a report today that Lopez and the Bucks have kind of come to a mutual agreement that they're going to be parting ways. I think it might be time. I'm not going to say it's the wrong decision to get rid of Lopez, but what I will say is, while there are deficiencies in Lopez's game at this age or at this stage in his career, there's still things he does that are really important to the team, and things that he does that, if we get rid of him in free agency, the Bucks are really going to miss things that Lopez used to do for them. And I think the best example of it, if you go back to 2022, when Middleton got hurt in the Bulls series, and then they played the Celtics in the second round, and they almost won that series without Middleton at all. Like, that was, to me, prime Giannis. I don't think Giannis has ever played better than he did that series, and I don't know if he ever will again.
Mm-hmm.
But Drew Holiday didn't do much of anything on offense. Middleton was gone, so they relied on Portis and Connaughton and other guys a lot. And I mean, they had their moments, but it was the Giannis show. But one of the things that kept the Bucks in that series is the Celtics couldn't figure out how to defend the rim without Rob Williams on the floor. But Lopez made Rob Williams pretty much unplayable because he stretches the floor as a big man so well, and he shot great in that series. And even when Lopez isn't shooting well, and I know this year was a down shooting season for him comparatively, just the fact that he's willing to pull the trigger and he has that pedigree as a shooter from the center position, especially with Giannis and Kuzma on the team, I think there's a chance that we get rid of Lopez and halfway through the season we're like, oh man, I didn't realize how important Lopez was to the offense. Not so much to the defense anymore because he's old and he's slow, but the offense, Lopez still plays a really important spot to me.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm feeling. And I might be more on the side of I think they should let him go just because he's too slow, and that's been one of their Achilles heels this year, was just athleticism and speed, which they're getting better at in pretty much every position but Lopez. And so I think it's time he does go. But I still think he had a great year, and I think a lot of fans are saying he is the problem. Yeah, he's a part of it, but he still did exactly what he did the year before that. And so I think he lost a step in terms of his agility, in terms of his speed. But he still shot the three ball well. He still protected the rim and things like that. So what's the player grade you'd give him?
Yeah, I do want to say I'm still on team. It's probably best to let him go, even though I do think he's an important player. But I'd probably give him a B minus. I don't know. I'm gonna say C plus. It's just the age curve. It's amazing he's made it this long, and it's time for him. And I think he can play a role on a competitive team, but you can't rely on him for 35 minutes a game like you were able to 3 years ago.
Yeah. Man, we keep having the same grades because I had a C plus as well. And I think just the fact that he got benched in the series. Like, when's the last time you watched a Bucks game where Brook Lopez didn't start?
Yeah.
That means a lot. And even against a team that's fast like that, the Pacers, you still throw him out there in the starting lineup, and then you bring Bobby off the bench and figure out the lineups later. But the fact that he got benched showed that he really was pretty unplayable in that series, and that's something we saw this season. And it's a good thing we didn't end up playing the Knicks because we would have gotten exposed so badly against the Knicks. The few times we played them this season, they would start out with Brook on Cat, and that was just torture to watch. He would just because Cat is so good at shooting threes, obviously, but he can get downhill really quickly, and Lopez stood no chance. So they'd switch Giannis onto Cat, and he'd do okay, but then that would mean OG or Bridges or one of those guys is running around launching threes, and Lopez is trying to keep up. So
Yeah.
I think just the state of the NBA, they really exposed him, and there's some games where he was the worst player on the floor just because of his lack of speed, and so that's
Yeah.
why I had him in the C's. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it's just time.
He just
And
doesn't set up well to defend those big men that are in the Eastern Conference right now. I get you throw
mhm,
you talks about Cat, he's a perfect example. Miles Turner is the same in a lot of ways. And then Porzingis is like that too.
mhm.
The one guy I felt like Lopez has always done pretty well defending is Embiid. But other than
Yeah,
that, I think there's a lot of matchups where he would get played off the floor pretty quickly in the playoffs.
yeah. Even against Jarrett Allen, I think would have been a struggle. Yeah,
Imagine watching him try to defend Mobley too. That would be pain.
yeah. It would be. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. It's time. And with the 2K rating, I have him lower than 2K does by quite a bit actually. They have him at an 83. I have him down tied with Kuzma with an 80. And some people might say that's pretty low, but I mean, still is a really high IQ player that can do a couple things, but he's just getting played out of the league. And I think like in that report that came out today, there's going to be some teams that pay him. Teams like the Lakers or the Warriors that really just need a big guy that can go out there and raise the floor of their lineup. I think they're going to want to Brook Lopez, but yeah, it's time we let him go.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, this is where it gets really fun because we had to talk about Lopez and Prince and Kuzma, but now the bench guys are going to be really fun. So let's start with our best two bench players, and Gary Trent and Bobby Portis. Let's go with Gary first.
Okay, why don't you take this one?
Okay. Um, I'll give you my grade first. Let me pull up what I had again. I had an A minus for Gary Trent.
Hmm.
Um, I kind of played with giving him an A, but he really struggled to start the season. He was a big reason why we started 2-8. Just had horrible shooting splits, and a guy that we were really confident coming in to be this starting shooting guard, and gave us nothing. He literally got benched for DeLon Wright and for Andre Jackson and Ryan Rollins and all that. It was really bad at the beginning, but him coming off the bench was the answer for a long time, and started to get into his rhythm. I think defensively he did exactly what I expected. Wasn't a lockdown defender by any means, but he got into the passing lanes and got a lot of steals, and I think he showed the most effort of the wing defenders. Him and AJ Green I think were just good at creating chaos
Hmm.
compared to like a Prince who just seems super nonchalant. And so I really like that from Trent, but obviously doesn't have the tools to be a lockdown defender. But him in the playoffs, him in the final stretch of the season, once they started rolling out that lineup, um, that bench lineup that was really good, the bench and Giannis group. And then obviously had two of the last three games in the playoffs went for at least 30. I think he had 37 in that one where him and Giannis both had 37 in game three, I think. And then people are going to talk about how he had those turnovers at the end of game five. But forget those turnovers. The Bucks wouldn't have even been in that game if it wasn't for Gary.
Yeah.
He was nailing threes. What did he have, like 6 threes in the second half in overtime or something like that? So he was huge in that one. And so I think the way he finished the season, the way he showed that he can perform in the playoffs, I'm gonna give him an A minus.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I wonder if he's going to be the next in the long line of shooting guards who take a 1 year deal with the Bucks, kill it, and then go off and get a big contract somewhere else, kind of like the Grayson Allen, the Malik Beasley type mold.
Hmm.
So I wonder what's going to happen with his future because I I was surprised with how tough it was for him to carve out a role in the starting lineup and even with consistent minutes off the bench. I just, we thought he was the starting two guard written in pen and would be that the whole season, but he just wasn't at times.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think that's enough to knock him a little bit, but I'm so grateful for Gary, and even if he leaves, he'll be one of my favorite Bucks in the last decade. He was awesome.
Yeah, he's the he's the type of personality I like having on the team too.
Yeah, for sure. All right, and my 2K rating for him, I'm gonna give him an 82. I think if he comes back next year with no Dame, he could potentially be our second best player, which is sad, but also good for him. But 2K has him at a 79, but this is before the playoffs. They haven't boosted it at all for that, and I'm sure they'll bring him up to like 81 or something, but I got him at an 82.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, you want to take Bobby? I know you said you had a rant prepared.
Yeah. So to me, Bobby is an interesting case study in how different the NBA is now than it used to be. So if you think about, and I did a lot of research on this, what the NBA was like 10 years ago, because we know there is so much talent in the NBA right now. There are players right now who are stuck on deep benches on teams that are never going to get to play much for, who would have been starters back in the 90s or the early 2000s, and they can't get on the court today just because of how deep the league is. So I went back and I looked at the reports or the outcomes for free agency in 2015. And I looked at all the contracts and all the numbers that were signed by free agents in 2015. And I wrote down the name of every player who signed a contract for more than $10 million a year from 2015. And I want to read some of these names because I think it's really funny to look back at. So I'm going to start with there's a section of stars that obviously got more than 10 million. So we've got LeBron, Dame, Anthony Davis, Kawhi, Kevin Love, Jimmy Butler, Draymond Green, Dwayne Wade, Chris Middleton, and LaMarcus Aldridge. Those guys all got much bigger deals. Then there's a group of role players. Some of them I'm like, okay, it makes sense. And some of them like, what? That dude got more than $10 million? It makes no sense. So I'm going to read off this list of players. So Danny Green with the Spurs. Makes sense. Damari Carroll with the Raptors. But then there's some weird ones like Brandon Knight, Tyson Chandler when I think he was like 30 already at that point. Aaron Aflalo, Monte Ellis, Wes Matthews, Pat Bev, Robin Lopez,
Oh,
really old Rajon Rondo with the Sacramento Kings, Rodney Stuckey, Brandon Bass, Lemon Pepper Lou Williams, DeAndre Jordan got a max contract. Reggie Jackson got a huge deal from the Pistons. And then Paul Millsap with the Hawks. This one's kind of funny. Al Farouk Aminu, Portland. Amon Shumpert in Cleveland. Goran Dragic had a huge deal with Miami. And Brook Lopez in Brooklyn. And then two I wanted to focus on. The Bucks gave Greg Monroe 3 years for $50 million. So he was making, what would that be? Like almost $17 million a year. And I love Greg Monroe, but that's a lot of money.
mhm.
In 2015 terms, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Bobby Portis right now is making $12 million a year. So there's another guy who signed almost the exact same contract in 2015 that Bobby is on right now in 2025, and it's Amir Johnson with the Boston Celtics. Does Amir Johnson ring a bell to you at all?
I don't even know who that is, and I know most guys.
Yeah. Amir Johnson, I didn't know who he was either. He was making $12 million a year in 2015. His first season as a Celtic, he had 7.3 points per game and only started, I forgot to write it down, but I think it was like 38 games for the Celtics. So
Wow.
yes, Bobby has some issues. Yes, there's some things that I wish Bobby would do a little bit differently. Um, but he's making the same amount of money today that Amir Johnson made 10 years ago.
Man,
And I just wonder with him, is he going to fall victim to the fact that the NBA is so deep right now? Like, I wonder if there's any good, playoff caliber, championship caliber teams out there that are looking around the league thinking, Bobby Portis is exactly what we need. I just wonder, with how deep the league is, how many young guys there are, if any of the good teams actually think that. And I wouldn't be
yeah.
surprised if the answer is no, and then that leads to Bobby just opting into his player option and sticking with the Bucks.
Yeah. One thing I've heard is that some people are saying it would be smart of Bobby to opt in this year, and then that would allow him to get another extension with the Bucks. That would probably get him more money than it would on the open market. Because I agree, there's probably not many teams that like he'll get signed, of course, but there's not many teams that are thinking he's the final piece. And so also, if Brook leaves like they're saying he's going to, this is Bobby's chance to be the starting center.
Yeah, yeah.
And so he'd be dumb not to. And I think if anything, he's going to opt out and try to get more with the Bucks. But I think I don't understand how it works, but I've seen some cap guys say that he could get the most by opting in this year and then extending again in the future.
Yeah. He's always going to fill the box score. He'll score. He's the type of guy who, as a center, he can shoot well enough that he'll help the spacing with Giannis and Kuzma. He'll rebound more statistically than Brook ever did. I mean, there's lots of things he does well. Um, yeah, he's got his issues,
Mm-hmm.
but I had seen a lot of discourse about his defense being horrible this year. And yeah, there was moments when I was really frustrated with him, but I went and looked it up on Basketball Reference, and his defensive rating this year was 110. And in his 5 years with the Bucks, the worst it's ever been is 112. The best it's ever been is 109. He's been within that range of 3 his entire career with the Bucks. I mean, statistically, his drop off, the only thing that I thought was a real drop off for him looking at the stats was his 2-point shooting percentage was dropped off quite a bit, and his 3-point percentage was all the way down to 36, which is the worst for him as a Buck. But I think the narrative that his defense fell off a cliff is a little bit overplayed.
Yeah, and something I've always thought about is his defense looks bad because he replaces Brook Lopez. And people want to see the guy in there protecting the rim and blocking shots. That's not who Bobby is. He's going to come out there and play with energy and create havoc, but he's not going to be a Brook Lopez. And so, yeah, I think his defense has been better this year. And it really showed up in the playoffs and like that, those last couple weeks of the season once he came back from his suspension. That bench and Giannis lineup, his defense looked really good. And so that gives me hope for next year. I'm hoping he doesn't slide back into the beginning of the regular season Bobby. But
Yeah.
if he continues to play like that, he could be a good starting center with that team next year.
The other thing to remember is he did steroids. Imagine how much better he's going to be now that he's enhanced.
And he says he just took the wrong pill. Yeah, right. Man. So what would you give him for a grade? You can. I was
um,
thinking about it, ignoring the suspension.
okay. I'll say B minus.
Okay. I had him at a B. Yeah, the only other thing I'll add is him and Brook are the guys that can always come in and put up stats when Giannis and Dame are out, and so we can't lose both of those guys. We need one of them back for sure.
Yeah.
Next year he's going to be our second best player if he comes back.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. Next, let's go to Kevin Porter Jr. I'm interested to see what you think here.
Yeah, he's really tough for me. I've seen a lot of people talking like they need to decide between Ryan Rollins and Kevin Porter Jr. And my thought is, what's the problem with having both? I think both can be a part of the future for the Bucks. Couple numbers I saw from KPJ in the part of the season where he was on the Bucks. He averaged 11.7 a night on a near 50-40-90 pace. So he was shooting over 50% from 2, over 40% from 3, but he was only at like 86% from the line. So I mean, other than free throws, he was shooting so well. His defensive rating was 110, which I think checks out watching him. He wasn't terrible. He tried. He put forth effort. The only thing that worries me with him, though, is there's two franchises now thinking in Cleveland and Houston who at one point thought Kevin Porter Jr. was going to be a big part of their future and were excited about what he was going to be. And both of those teams cut bait on him to the point where he was out of the league last season. Mm-hmm. So the Bucks are in a situation, and us as fans are in a situation where, you know, Cavs fans and Rockets fans have been there before, excited about KPJ, and it did not turn out well. And so I think that they need to be careful with how many years they offer him or how much money they offer him. But I don't necessarily think that's going to be too hard because he has such a poor reputation around the league. I don't know if there's going to be other teams with a real large appetite to go pay a ton of money for Kevin Porter.
Yeah, that's where I'm at too. I think he has a player option for like $2.5 million. I think he'll opt out, but I think the Bucks get him back for like 2 year, $8 million or something like that.
Yeah.
So not much more. Yeah, I agree. I think they got to bring back both of those guys, Rollins and KPJ. They both can kind of play off ball, on ball, the 1, the 2. So I don't think it would be a problem if those guys end up playing the court, being on the court at the same time. So that would be exciting to me, getting both of them back.
That's the key part, is I think they can play together. Yeah, you can't, especially with Dame out, you got to have guys that you can trust to handle the ball. Because the other one that you really trust was Middleton, and they traded him away for a dude that you do not want Kuzma dribbling the ball anywhere near as much as Middleton did. So you've got to load up on guards that can handle it. And even a guy like Gary Trent or AJ Green, you know, they're more off-ball players, and I think you'd be playing with fire if you tried to choose between Rollins and Porter. I think they should make an effort to bring them both back.
Yeah, and another thing I forgot to talk about with the cap, that $14.1 million taxpayer mid-level exception, they can split that between players.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have to give it all to Bobby Portis or to Gary Trent or something. So my hope is that, we'll get into this in a second, but that they split that between like 3 guys. So they could do it.
Yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that more later.
Okay. All right, what would your grade be on KPJ?
I'd give him a B+. No, I'd give him an A-. Just with his relative to expectation, they traded him for freaking Marjan Beauchamp.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a heist for what they got out of Porter.
Yeah. Agreed. I had him an A too. He was an A for me until game 1 and 2 of the playoffs when he just looked like a schoolyard kid out there.
That play where he drove in against the Pacers and like turned as he was trying to do the layup, and then was and then just threw it backwards and it barely even hit the backboard.
Oh man, yeah, he had some really bad plays in that game.
Yeah.
But then game 3, I think it was, he was the only reason they stayed in that one, or whatever game it was where they lost by like 10 or 12. He was pretty good, and then kind of worked his way into the lineup in the playoffs and the back end of the series and was able to be good. But there are a lot of games the Bucks shouldn't have won. In that dumb stretch where they kept running out this same starting lineup post-trade deadline, KPJ was the only reason they won a lot of those games because they were down by 10, 15 points in the first half in like 70% of the games. And then they were able to come back because he'd have 15 in the third quarter and teams couldn't stop him. And so there's a lot of games we shouldn't have won without him, and I don't think you can say that about many Bucks players this season outside of Giannis and Dame, maybe Gary Trent, that there's guys that you can literally see why they won.
Yeah.
And so I really want that guy back, and I think he deserves an A-. Should have been an A if it wasn't for the playoffs.
Yeah. And if they do re-sign him to 2 years, $8 million, we can't expect a dude that's making $4 million a year to consistently be that guy. But
Yeah.
if he can 10 times a season and once or twice in the playoffs be that guy, that
Hmm.
is so worth $4 million.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'm kind of glad his reputation is cooked because that's going to help the Bucks be able to retain him.
Yeah.
But still don't condone anything he did off the court.
No. Hate him as a person, love him as a player.
Yeah. Agreed. Um, I was going to say one more thing. Oh, 2K rating. I'm going to give him an 81. I think 2K has him at like a 79 or something. Let's see. Yeah, 79. So I think he is better than Kuzma in terms of talent. I'm gonna give him an 81. He's my baseline. I'm measuring guys against Kuzma right now. Okay, maybe my favorite Buck outside of the Giannis, Dame, Chris, and Drew category. He might be my favorite Buck I've seen play and follow. Let's talk about AJ Green, Scary Bird.
Yeah, he's awesome. When you get a guy who can shoot the corner three like he can, off such a quick catch too, you've got to do everything you can to keep him around Giannis and give him as many minutes as he can get. Um, I believe if I remember right, he played 22 minutes a game this season. And I think that number's got to be higher next year. He's kind of a reason to me where if the Bucks have a choice between do we pay Gary Trent the mid-level exception or do we split it on some other guys that might help at different positions, I could see the logic behind letting Gary Trent walk because I think AJ Green can be at the very least a Walmart version of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Um, the only knock I have on AJ is when his shooting is inconsistent, when he's struggling, his defense also has that same effect. Him making threes gives him confidence in all other aspects of the game. And luckily he shoots well for most of the season, but yeah, that stretch, I think it was like January, early February, he really and like October too. Those two stretches, I was like, "Oh man, is he really going to regress after last year?" But then he has the like you said you're watching all the highlights of him. Like I'm sure you saw the highlights of him against Wembanyama. You remember those? When he's hitting step backs over Wemby at 7-4. And so stuff like that gets you super excited. And then last year, the big knock on him was he wasn't a playoff riser. He really struggled to shoot against the Pacers last year. This year, he was incredible, so necessary and important to the team. And every time they won, he was right there. His fingerprints were all over it. So I'm excited for him to come back this next year, and hopefully they give him a big extension. But what's your player grade on him?
I would say for him, I'd give him a B. I think his defense wasn't quite as good as I hoped it would be. He's very active, but he also has lots of deficiencies just with his size and his frame. He's never going to be that great of a defender, but at least he tries, right? But then my thing with him too is I wish he would cut more and cut better.
Mm.
And maybe part of that is coaching. And maybe if you get a more serious coach in this season or next season, some of that can change. But with him, I watch him and sometimes I'm like, why can't you be Christian Brown, what
Yeah.
he is for the Nuggets? But Green, for everything he is, he just doesn't cut as consistently and he doesn't finish at the rim near as well. And
Yeah.
he's not the defender that Brown is either, obviously, but still a good player, still a useful guy. Um, but I don't know.
Yeah, I had him at a B plus, and I think I agree with you on his defense. He's super active, but I love when players. I think one player that really comes to mind that he did this against was Jimmy Butler. He'd defend Jimmy Butler. Butler's like, oh yeah, I got this scrawny white dude on me. I'm gonna take him to town, go draw a foul, whatever. And he gets his butt in him. You know, he moves his feet so quick that he just kind of creates chaos, even if he's not a super strong guy. So being 6'4", being able to guard big wings, like even in the playoffs, I didn't agree with this, but they'd have him on Siakam against the Pacers. So he's a guy I think can be a starting small forward for the Bucks if they need him to this next season, just because he has that experience against bigger, stronger wings just because of his ability to stay in front of them. So I don't know. Yeah, I have him at a B plus, and I give him a rating of like a 78 because he can really good 3-point shooter, bit of defense, but I think his biggest asset might be his IQ. He's just a smart dude that is really good in the screen game with Giannis. He sets a lot of screens for Giannis, and the screen and roll, take a three off of it kind of thing. He really knows where he's supposed to be at on the court, on offense and on defense. So that's something I really like about him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Not to bring up another skinny white guy, but what if he takes the same development arc that Sam Hauser's been on the last few years? Just slowly starts to do more and more on ball, and just become a little more of a fluid mover, fluid player in the offense. And part of that is I think the Celtics offensive ecosystem is a lot better, but I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. All right. Next, we're going to talk about. We're not going to do all of them. I only have 13 guys listed here. Let's talk about Andre Jackson Jr.
He just, to me, didn't change much at all this year in his rookie season. He's the same guy, fouls a ton, plays too fast. I don't know if he's great at playing within himself. And man, some games his shot is just rough. I was looking through his stats today for game-by-game split of his true shooting percentages. Sometimes it'd be like 90, 80, 70%. And then other games, he'd have like 4 games in a row where his true shooting percentage was 0. And it's just like, I think he's a piece that could be valuable moving forward, but that dude's got to figure out how to round out his game before he can be even remotely or relatively trusted in any big moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I have him at a C for this year, and that's being him starting over 40 games or however many it was. But that was so weird, him starting, because he'd only play like 15, 12 minutes in some of those games he started. Wouldn't even appear in the second half, and so I think it was all just to get some energy coming out to start the game. But it just shows how much the Bucks were struggling that he was starting games just to be energy out there.
Yeah, and
so,
he's got to stop thinking, okay, the reason I'm on this team is for energy. He's got to move past that and become a real NBA player.
Yeah, yeah. He's still got a long ways to go. And honestly, if he got included in a trade this offseason, just as a throw-in to get some value, I wouldn't be too concerned that he's going to go somewhere else and be a dominating player.
Yeah. I don't know. I would. That always happens to whoever the Bucks trade.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. But would you have him around like a C, or what do you have him at?
Yeah, I'd say so. I didn't know if we were going to go this deep into the roster, so the only other... I don't have a grade that I wrote down for him, but
Okay.
it works for me.
Okay, and I have him at a 74 overall.
Okay.
Okay, next, I think this is one of the last really fun ones. Let's talk about Ryan Rollins.
Yeah. Loved studying him a little more. Couple stats I had written down I thought were really important. 41% from 3, 12.5 points per game over the last 10 games when he really started playing more. 4.5 assists over the last 10 games. 72% true shooting percentage over the last 10 games. Add in all that, he had a good defensive rating. He had a positive defensive box plus minus, which is not something you can say for a lot of the other Bucks guards and wings. I just think I saw you had said online that you think he's the second coming of Malcolm Brogdon, and I really, really agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm surprised more people aren't saying that because he looked exactly like him.
Yeah.
Brogdon was always so good at getting to the rim, and that's what Ron's best skill is just slashing and being able to finish. And he does have some dumb moments where it's like 6 seconds into the shot clock and he just goes one-on-one ISO and tries to lay it up. That he'll play out of himself when he's getting more minutes. But I just think he's so decent at everything. He's kind of that quintessential point guard that can shoot threes, get to the rim, defend, play make, does it all. But we'll see if he can really become super talented at one of those. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, he's such a smooth accelerator, creates a lot of separation, and then he just consistently makes the right read in the pick and roll.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like him a lot.
yeah. What would your grade be on him?
I'd give him an A, maybe even A plus. I think that we didn't expect anything out of him, and in a lot of ways, he's saved what little bit of hope we have going into next season.
Yeah, I have him at an A plus.
Ooh,
Completely blew everything we had out of the water in terms of expectations. But and he's a two-way guy,
yep,
so being a playoff starter as a two-way guy, even with injuries, I think is deserving of at least an A.
yeah.
Okay, and then I have him at a 76. I think 2K has him at 77, so give him some respect. Okay, the last guy I want to talk about, we already talked about Pat Connaughton, the only bright moment of his season, so I'm not going to get into that. But I want to hear what you think about Jericho Sims.
It's so tough because in a vacuum, he's what I thought would have been cool to see with the Bucks for the last couple years. He's just kind of the antithesis of Brooke Lopez in a lot of ways. Like all
Mm-hmm.
the things that Brooke couldn't do that we've thought over the last few years. Oh, it'd be so nice to have a center that could do these things. Jericho Sims does those things, but then he doesn't do any of the things that Brooke Lopez has consistently done over the last few years. He's just the opposite type player. And he's the type of guy that I think would do really well playing with a guy like Luca or Dame too, a lob threat,
Mm-hmm.
set the big screen and then just roll hard to the rim. But I don't know how he fits on a team with Giannis. I like him as a player, but if Doc hates him and is never going to play him, then it's hard to one make an evaluation on him, or hard to say that I hope he comes back next year if Doc's never going to play him.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think it is telling that Doc did play him in that series and he got some run. Part of that being that Brooke Lopez was just unplayable.
Yeah,
But his defense is pretty freaking fun to watch.
yeah,
Being able to guard all five positions. We've never seen a Bucks defender like literally and since I started watching the Bucks in like 2013 or 14, there's never been a guy even close to that can guard all five positions, pick up a guard at the 3-point line and follow him all the way to the rim and contest it. And so that's something I do want back. But yeah, I agree. He can't be the starting center for the Bucks. He's not talented enough or the right fit. And so having him be back as a rotational big that can come in and play good defensive minutes, I think is important. But I do like his ability to set 50 screens in one possession. He just has a lot of energy, and I think it's fun.
yeah, yeah. Set screens, play defense like that for the cheap price that he'll be on. They, I wish Doc would have played him more because I like him as a player,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just hard to say because we rarely saw him.
Yeah, true. Okay, well, that wraps up this portion of the episode. We're getting pretty high up into the minute count, and so I think we'll just go quickly through which players we think the Bucks can bring back, which ones we want them to, and then I guess in that same conversation we'll talk about whether we think the Bucks will bring them back.
Okay. Before
So
we transition into that, I'd like to um, read a quick word from our sponsor for today's episode, if that's all right with you.
go for it.
Okay, so sponsoring today's Kip and Chips podcast. Today we are sponsored by the one and only Shelby Stories. Shelby is our favorite author and has written 2 lively tales and is currently working on a 3rd. She specializes in young adult and historical fiction. Get your nose in her books today and you won't regret it. You can check her out on Instagram at ShelbyStories0302. That's at ShelbyStories0302, or on Amazon at the same link. Smash that link below and enjoy her stories. So thanks for sponsoring the podcast today.
Love you, Shelby. All right. So let's get into that next portion. We're gonna. Do you want me to give you a player and have you tell me what you think, or do you want to just start with it?
So, you're talking about guys that are still like to be free agents for the Bucks.
Yeah.
Why don't you just tell me which ones you think are worth bringing back, and then I'll see if my list differs from yours at all.
Okay. Yeah, I think we talked about bringing back Rollins and KPJ.
Mm-hmm.
Those two, I was trying to rank them the other day, who I want back the most. And I think I want those guys back more than I want Gary Trent back. Just because we need a ball handler, like you're saying, and we can supplement with more wings if we don't get Gary back. But having both of those primary ball handlers back, and Rollins is a guy that has been such a fun career arc that I don't want to lose. I don't want to see him go somewhere else. He's just one of those guys that we grew from within. We got to keep him. So I think they're at the top of my list. Gary Trent is as well. Really hope we can get him back. And I honestly think that we can get back all three of those guys for that $14 million amount. The mid-level exception, I think Gary might command like in the $7 million range, and then maybe another four for KPJ and another three for Rollins. We'll see what it ends up being, but I think that's something that's very possible. And I really want Bobby back, no matter what it takes. I think whether it's a 2-year deal or something more short term, I think if Brooke walks, he's a guy that is really important to get back. And so I'm hoping we can get him. I do want Sims back as well. I think we have his bird rights, and so he's a little bit easier to retain. Yeah, he's a guy I want. And these are all reasonable ones, I think, in terms of our cap space, who we can get back.
Mm-hmm.
But then I want Prince to go. I want Brooke to go. Am I missing someone? I think that's it. And obviously Pat's going to come back. So honestly, I'm hoping we spend all of our money on getting those guys back, because they produced off the bench, guys that could be coming into the starting lineup and that we can trust after having them for at least half a season, most of those guys. And so I'm hoping we go that route rather than bringing in some new free agents, unless we get some more guys like Gary Trent that can come back on a minimum and be surprisingly cheap.
Mm-hmm. So I don't think my opinions are really any different than yours, so I don't see it being worthwhile for me to talk through things, because I would have said exactly what you just said. But if we look at where the Bucks are at this season, and I think it's important to frame this conversation. We talked about differences between NFL, NBA. If you're an NBA GM, you have to have a whole different set of stones on you to make decisions that NFL GMs just don't have to make. Like you hear in the NBA, they always talk about, oh, we value flexibility or optionality. We need to have flexible options with our team building. The NFL, you always have that, because in the NFL, it can be relatively easy to maneuver a little bit and end up with 10 draft picks in one draft class. And you do your scouting, you make a couple good picks, you could get 5 starters in one draft class if you get lucky and things break your way. And when you're making 10 picks in the NFL, you can reasonably hope that the 8th, the 9th, the 10th guy you drafted in that draft class can end up being legit players on your team that actually contribute. In the NBA, you don't have that. And then we also talked about guaranteed contracts being different and all this. Like a situation I think about a lot is the San Francisco 49ers a couple years ago, when they traded everything to get Trey Lance. And then he ended up just being a colossal bust. But nobody ever talks about it because they got Brock Purdy. So they were saved because the NFL is the way it is, but the NBA is not like that. In the NBA, you got to have the stones to make a decision and know that this one decision you make is going to be a turning point in your franchise. And if that one decision doesn't go correctly, you all are going to lose your jobs because of that one decision. And that's the type of stuff that Horst did when he made the Drew Holiday trade. And he made a couple other moves that really set up that 2021 run really well. But what we're dealing with right now is the end game of that timeline that Horst put us on back in 2020.
Yeah.
And it's all worth it now because they won the championship, but it's the type of stuff like you make a decision like that, and then obviously you compound on top of it when you make the Dame trade a few years later. There's no easy way out. And you kind of just have to take your medicine and realize that in the NBA you can't get lucky like the 49ers did. So we talk about, the Bucks, they're not going to win the championship. They're not going to probably even come anywhere close next season. And I think you could probably say the same thing about the year after that. But I think they can still try their hardest to get lucky. And so when I look at free agents that I want them to take a chance on, I look at guys that give them a chance to get lucky, whether it's just on a 1-year rental or a Ryan Rollins type buy low, build them up from within, and then extend them on something later on. So I kind of have a thought. Would it be better to just look at really high variance type guys that might not be highly valued across the league, but still have a range of outcomes where you could buy low and they end up being a really good player as a free agent, and just build the ultimate variance team and just hope that everything breaks right for the Bucks, and maybe they make a run in the playoffs. I mean, they're still not going to win the championship, but they at least make this season fun.
Yeah, I would really like that perspective, and I think that's what it comes down to, is making the season fun. We can talk about this too, but I have the percentage of Giannis being traded extremely low.
Me
I
too.
think he's going to come back. I think he wants to be there. I think he's excited about running point Giannis next year and just trying to see what he can do with this group. And I've talked to you about it before, but the one team that has done this before that's really an anomaly is the Warriors. The Warriors going on that 2 timeline stretch where they are just so bad after that first championship run with KD, once KD left and everything. And then Clay was injured. They had nobody. They got the second pick in the lottery, got James Wiseman, they got Jordan Poole, and they started their second stretch, their second run, and they ended up winning again in 2022. The Bucks don't have the luxury of having lottery picks because they don't own any of their picks, but I think this is a team that's the mindset they should be in, even if it doesn't work out, is we need to, develop all these young guys that we have for once, because we never do that the last 5 years, and try to have a team that's ready when Dame is back, even if he's not the same Dame. And so that's my hope for this year. But it all comes down to having an identity, like the Clippers did this year, a team that no one expected to be very good, but they gave the Nuggets a run in the playoffs because they had that defensive identity. And so I hope the Bucks are able to get those guys back that had that intensity in the playoffs and try to run that out next year.
Yeah, I agree. It's just tough because they don't have draft picks at all.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't own their own first round pick till 2031. So they are as motivated as any other team in the league to continue competing and be as good as they can. And when you think they're not going to, realistically, with how late they'll be picking, they're never going to get a guy in the draft that's actually going to help them that much. And they don't have any assets other than Giannis really at this point that they could really trade for anything substantial in return. So if there's anything that's going to help them, it's going to be bargain bin shopping in free agency. And then next year they'll have more money opening up, and there's some more interesting guys on the free agent market starting in 2026 that they could potentially negotiate with. But I wrote down a list of a couple categories of guys I thought were interesting as outside free agents. Can I read them to you?
Let's hear it.
Okay. Let me pull up my iPhone note here. Okay, so first category, high upside guys who could hit if everything goes right, but realistically probably won't hit. Okay. Precious Achua, Jonathan Kuminga, Dante Exum. I had Jericho Sims written. I also had Ryan Rollins written. Trey Mann, Bol, Zaire Williams, Day'Ron Sharp. This is one I really like. This next one I'm about to say, Jalen Williams, the center from OKC.
Yeah.
Jackson Hayes, and then the classic Kai Jones. And then the next category is guys who've done it before but are a year or two removed from their real effective years. Karis LeVert, Gary Harris, Kevin Porter Jr., Monte Morris, Paul Reed, and then Chris Paul. Injury-prone guys who still contribute when healthy. Guys who I think would be worth it if they're healthy. But once again, probably won't be. Malcolm Brogdon, Time Lord, Rob Williams, and Ben Simmons. And then the last is big ticket guys who might take a mid-level exception. This would probably take the full exception just for these players. Quentin Grimes, Ty Jerome, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and then the last guy who I thought was interesting but I didn't know how to group was Cam Thomas.
Yeah, those are some good names.
The only path I see them really improving the team is through free agency. And I think they got to take a couple big swings because they have to get lucky if they want to improve moving forward.
Yeah, and it seems like every team has had that. A lot of teams have gotten lucky on one dude. And that's my hope. Think about where we'd be thinking right now if we had the same team we did before the trade deadline. If we still had Beauchamp, we still had DeLon Wright, all those guys, we'd be like, okay, thank goodness for Ryan Rollins. But I'm grateful that John Horst did what he did, getting KPJ and Sims and all these guys that, like you said, have performed before and maybe not currently or still are kind of unknowns. And it makes it really fun, and I think it's giving me hope going into the offseason because you never know what's going to happen next year. So I'm a little excited about that. But yeah, maybe some guys like Zaire Williams, I think is one I could see.
Yeah.
But
yeah, if you
it's
give
going to
me,
be fun.
Yeah, I could get excited about a lot of these. Like even, I know some of them are less realistic, but if you give me Jonathan Kuminga and Jalen Williams, like one of those two guys, I'd be really excited about.
Yeah. Yeah, if we can somehow get Williams, I think he'll probably be a little more expensive. But if we could get him as a starting five, I'd be pretty pumped about that.
Yeah, the Thunder aren't going to have the money to keep him.
Yeah. That's true. As long as it's not Jackson Hayes starting at center for us, I'll be okay.
Yeah. Yeah, let's not go that route.
Yeah, maybe on our next episode we can dive more into the free agency. Other guys we'd want them to sign. How much we think guys will be worth, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you have any closing thoughts on the pod?
No, I think things are going to take a while to materialize. I just think as Bucks fans we need to temper our expectations and realize that this season's not going to be one for competition. It's going to be a little bit of a throwback to the years where we're watching to see how the young guys are playing. I'm going to be really excited to see how AJ Green plays this year, how Ryan Rollins, Kevin Porter Jr., does Jericho Sims come back, and if he does, is he any better? Would even a guy like Tyler Smith improve? I think I'm going to spend a lot more time watching singular players and paying attention to how those players develop and change their game. And then I hope we get a couple dart throws in free agency that we can get excited about as well. But
yeah,
we need to say all our prayers for Dame's calf and just try and enjoy the season as much as we can and just hope that it's fun. And then let's just not take Giannis for granted. We only get so many seasons of Giannis, and he continues to extend his prime in a way that baffles me. And we got to watch every second of his basketball we can, and then look forward to 2026 when Chris Middleton will re-sign on a cheap deal, come back, score a ton of points, and then retire as the number 2 all-time scorer for the Bucks.
Plus Drew Holiday's coming too. And Thon Maker makes his resurgence. Man, I've been seeing a lot of highlight videos saying people wanting to see because all the people want Giannis to go to the Spurs. And they're like, Giannis and Wemby together would be insane. And all the Bucks fans were like, they literally had that with Giannis and Thon Maker. Oh, what a dream.
Yeah.
All right. My closing thought is that I'm really enjoying all the Celtics trade rumors. And I was really bummed to see Tatum tear his Achilles too. That was honestly really saddening to me, even though I hate the Celtics. But once that passed, it kind of opened everyone's eyes to what's going to happen with the Celtics. They can't bring all these guys back. Tatum's hurt for all of next year. They're not going to be as good. So that's been my thing that's been fun to watch is all these rumors coming out. Drew Holiday, I think, is definitely going to be on the move. So that'll be fun to keep an eye on. But yep, I think that wraps up our podcast. Thanks for listening to Chip and Kip Sports. Make sure to check out Shelby Sayers' books. Go back to that link earlier on if you're interested. But next time we'll probably do another Packers podcast. But any
Yeah,
closing thoughts from Drew?
I want to tease a future episode. We're working on a deep dive on Jordan Love going into his third season. Also working on some fun fantasy draft type material for NFL fans out there. So stay tuned for that. Yeah, for me too, it's just happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, and thanks to all our listeners for sticking it out.
All right, watch out for deer.